But normally in Hollywood, when somebody has a success, everybody tries to go imitate that. But when you have a success as big as this, which was a phenom, it basically did like $1 billion, the powers to be get nervous. But more importantly, the directors, and I would need a big director, it's hard for them to see that as fresh territory. So what we're thinking about doing is I'm working with the producer of The Dark Knight, Chuck Roven. By the way, he's producing the sequel to The Dark Knight right now and Superman at the same time.
Wow.
So he's hard to get on the phone. But we're considering, and I've been writing the script, to turn the Hatter story in our world as the first movie. So we would meet this mysterious man in our world, fish out of water, and we would discover that Wonderland is real by the end of the movie, and then if that was successful, it would set the stage for the Looking Glass Wars.
Woo.
So it would be a change of sequencing, which is not easy because, you know, the concept of it with what happened with Lewis Carroll and Alice Little and the real Alice is really strong, and I want that to be part of it. So I think I might have figured it out, but it's going to take a while. So that's what's happening, and I've been slowed down because of the success of Tim Burton's movie. So, but
I feel like some of those set designers will read your book before they started working on it.
Did anybody feel like there was a few things they might have?
There was a couple lifts there.
Well, I've been in situations like that before. So, and then my friend and fellow author PJ Harsma and I, we have been friends and for a long time, and we created. PJ designed and created the Card Soldier Wars game, and he has his own book series called The Softwire, and he did a game called The Rings of Orbis. So what we love to do is try and find different ways to tell our story, whether it's...
If you could meet any one of the characters, who would you want to meet? Like...
Well, I meet them every day. They're in my head. It's who I gotta get out of my head.
Like they just walked up to your door.
I suppose I would, you know, it's, the reason that I love Alice so much is because she was the inspiration for the whole story. And the part of her character, the part of her story that inspired me to write the book had to do with something that happened to me when I was a young boy. And the idea, well, when I was a young boy, I was told to, you know, to kind of fit in and to be like everybody else and dress a particular way. And we did Christmas cards every year in my family, and we had to have perfect smiles and perfect dress. And when we entertained, we had that too. And I felt so fake, and I felt so restricted, and I felt so out of my body most of the time. And I really wanted to communicate the idea that when you're a kid, who you are, that uniqueness, your voice, that's the thing that you really distinguishes you from it. And so in my story, when you take the ultimate imagination of this girl, the strongest imagination, literally and figuratively, and then she comes to our world, to the time of, you know, Victorian England is, bless you, is so claustrophobic and restricted, and they extinguish that, they take that away from her. That's kind of what it's like, you know, when you're an adult and you're looking for, you know, you want to be kid-like. Well, that's where great art comes from. And so I was saying, you know, hold on to that piece of yourself. Hold on to that, because that's your kind of your creative. That's who you are. And so if I was to meet somebody, I'd want to hang out with her and know more about what it was like hanging out with the Little family and how she kept that alive during those 13 years before she got rescued.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
How many times can doppelganger split?
You know we can make mental notes about it.
Yes. No, I better make something up. You know, I don't have an answer for that. I never. I'll tell you what that leads to. It took me 5 years to write the first book because you do need to understand the rules and the logic so that you don't get stuck with the narrative and you don't write yourself into a corner. If it doesn't feel like it's possible, then people lose that suspension of disbelief. And obviously, the question about how many times doppelganger splits fell through the cracks. I mean, but that's the kind of question that I would normally answer. But at the same time, I wanted to let myself be free enough to, you know, write, and so I kind of wish I hadn't done it as many times because they did it in The Matrix, and it really bugged me. But you know, it just, once the first book was done, I couldn't go back. And you know, there's a few things that I wanted to change, and I look back. I'll tell you the number one scene that I would change if I could rewrite my first book. It seems so obvious and, you know, so idiotic of a solution I had at the time. So my story, Hatter searches for Alice for 13 years, and he finds her. She's at Buckingham Palace, and he jumps over this wall, and he gets shot by this guard, and he's really wounded badly. And he's wounded so badly that he decides he has to go back to Wonderland. Now, that's a cheat, because after 13 years, I mean, come on, he's Hatter Madigan. Let's tough it out, buddy. Come on. But I kept thinking, well, he's so powerful that as soon as he sees Alice, of course he'll bring Alice back. And that was where my logic broke down, and I stopped there. And then I finished the book. And then when I was working on the screenplay, I realized that that's a really lame moment, because the moment that you really want is you want the moment of the two lead characters. He's been searching for 13 years, and she's been waiting for 13 years to be face to face. And so I figured out the scene, and the scene was he finds his way into her chambers, and she's startled, and she thinks he's one of those crazy fans. And she's about to call the guards, and he makes his case for who he is, and she doesn't believe him. And there's a stalemate, and he won't leave, and she's staring at him, and she says to him, "Oh, wait a second. You're my servant, right? You're my bodyguard, so you have to do anything I say, right?" And he said, "Any command, right?" And he said, "Yes, my queen. What is it?" "You need to leave and never come back." Isn't that so much better? Isn't that torture? To live with that kind of torture every day, you could have made it better? I mean, come on. I'm so upset with myself. Hack! Any other, yeah?
When you're developing the characters, did you have one idea before you wrote for them, and then when you were writing, did you ever change them, like personality or how you wanted them to look?
You know, I put them in different situations, and so every situation would create a different dynamic, and so that dynamic would require a kind of personality moment or change. So I would wait and see, but I had an archetypal kind of thought about what their role would be in the story. You know, Hatter would support Alice, and he would be this kind of character because of the millenary and what the training that comes from the millenary requires, and what his job is, and so he would be more stoic, and he would be more of a listener and a watcher, because he writes hot guys better than Stephanie does. So I like Stephanie. We went to dinner one night. We were here in town, and she brought me out to dinner, and it was the two of us. And we sat in this booth. It was a really nice restaurant, and you know, we were having drinks and talking, and this woman came by. She was probably, I would say she was in her mid-30s, and she came by and she looked once, and then she walked, and I didn't really pay any attention, and she came back a few minutes later, like this, and there was like possessed in some kind of way. But what she was possessed with, I'll tell you what she was possessed with, because she turned and she went, "Stephanie, are you Stephanie Meyer?" And she goes, "Yes, I am." And what she was possessed with was the 14-year-old inside of her that was raging on hormones, because she went, "I don't want to get excited or anything, but I can't believe you're here." And she goes, "We're all reading your book. That person's reading your book. That person, you read your book. And you have a book club. I love your book so much. What do you think about the movie?" So Stephanie's super cool. She stops, and another girl comes over, and she goes, "You know, I'm not the only author sitting at this table." And she reaches down, and I'd given her one of my books signed, and I went, "Oh no." She picks up the book, and she goes to to these two women, points, she goes, he's an author as well. And they're looking at Stephanie, and they turn, they look at me, and they go, anyway, Stephanie, here's what we want to know.
Oh.
It was an amazing moment. It was so, I mean, it was so clear why she's a superstar. So,
They're insane.
they were just
We did the Project Book Day where she sort of headlined all
Charity.
charity. We were all there, and we're all YA authors, and we look into the audience, and there isn't anybody under 30. There's no fans here for me. I'm a fan, sure. They just love.
So, and they, for this charity, they made a poster, and there was 10 of us on the poster, and Stephanie was in the middle of the poster. And I was home in Los Angeles, and I had a party for the neighborhood. I think it was my son's birthday party, and this girl next door who's 13, she came over, and she freaked out when I told her that I know Stephanie. And she was so excited that she stopped talking. And I said, are you okay? And I said, hey, look, I want to show you, I have a poster I want to show you. So I brought her over and I showed her the poster of Stephanie and all of us from this. And I said, I can get you one if you'd like a poster. And she said, that would be great. And then she disappeared. Well, I didn't realize she went home, she got her camera, and she zoomed in on Stephanie's picture and took a picture of Stephanie on the poster and blew it up and put it on her wall. This is hard. This is competitive out there. This is tough.
I can't remember what the big, but I was kind of wondering, when were you first introduced to Alice in Wonderland? I mean, the original story, when did you read it?
Well, my grandmother's name was Alice, and it was my mother and my grandmother's favorite book, so I was introduced to it when I was 10. And I grew up in Minnesota, and I lived on a lake, and it was, out in the farm country. And my grandmother and mother thought it would be a really good idea to read that book to me about a girl in a blue dress falling down a rabbit hole, and I hated it. And the Looking Glass Wars is my revenge. Now, to be fair, of course, I reread it in college, and I really admire it. But I did have a bad reaction to it. Now, I told that story when I first published in the UK, and they were very, very upset with me. They were already upset with me because I was a Yank taking on their classic. Matter of fact, when I showed up at Heathrow, there were 5 people with placards that said, "Off with Frank Bedore's head." Oh. Wait, I thought it was a joke. Did you know there's 4 Lewis Carroll societies around the world?
Oh my God.
It's no joke. And I went, are you guys kidding me? My publishers are doing it. No, they go, how dare you? What do you think you're doing? So the BBC heard about this, so they decided to ask their children's laureate about this. This guy, Michael Morpurgo. And he said, well, this is a terrible idea. What is this guy doing rewriting our book? So the BBC said, why don't we have a debate? You and Michael. I went,
Oh yeah, that'll
oh, that'll go well. That'll sell a lot of books. So I show up. I said, okay. So I showed up. I said I would show up. And he lives out in the country, so he was going to be in one location. I was going to be in town. And so the night before I was to show up for this debate, I got a phone call from a research person, and this woman she was very stuffy, and she was asking me all these questions, and then she said, Mr. Bedore, is there anything that you feel should be left alone and not be reimagined? And I said, well, that's an excellent question. And I said, yes, I believe the movie There's Something About Mary should never be touched. And she did not laugh. I said, come on, that was pretty funny. And she said, no, literary. I was talking about literary works. I went, I am in so much trouble tomorrow. But then I showed up, and I was in the waiting room, and Tim Robbins was there. And I went, well, I introduced myself, and I go, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm doing this play on the Iraq invasion. And I went, oh, here in town? He goes, yeah, so I'm here to talk about it. Oh, what are you doing? I'm here to talk about my books. And he goes, well, I'm up first. And so the producer brought him into the into the studio, and we could hear what was happening, and there was a spirited debate about American movies, and they seemed to be blaming Tim for all the bad movies. And he goes, hey, look, I just live there, I don't make them all,